A black man dressed in civilian clothes stood outside Precinct 9 with his wrists fastened to a metal signpost by plastic restraints. He had been left there like the subject of a cruel joke. Vehicles passed. Pedestrians stared. 3 police officers stood nearby, laughing so hard that one of them wiped tears from his face. A cell phone recorded everything. What those officers did not know, what would eventually destroy their careers, reputations, and in one case a marriage, was that the man tied to the post carried a sealed letter inside his jacket. The letter had been signed by the mayor of Carlisle, Tennessee. It appointed him the city's new chief of police, effective immediately. Carlisle had never appointed a black police chief during its long history. That fact alone made the selection of Darius Whitfield headline news when Mayor Everett Sloan announced it publicly. The press conference had been carefully organized. The talking points were rehearsed. Photographers captured the ceremonial handshake from 14 different angles. Everett, a square-jawed man with silver hair and the permanent tan of someone who spent too much time upon golf courses, smiled broadly beside Darius. He told every camera inside the room that the appointment represented a new chapter for Carlisle. Darius had devoted most of his adult life to law enforcement. He began as a patrol officer in Memphis, became a detective in Nashville, and later served as deputy chief of a mid-sized department in Knoxville. Under his leadership, that department reduced violent crime by 31%. Darius also held a master's degree in criminology from Vanderbilt University. He had 2 daughters, a son, a mortgage, a golden retriever named Ranger, and the quiet confidence of someone who had been underestimated throughout his professional life and had learned to treat that underestimation as an advantage. At 6 feet tall and approximately 210 pounds, he was also physically imposing. But when Darius began his tenure in Carlisle, he did not wear a uniform. He did not carry a visible badge. He deliberately decided to drive through the city before reporting to the precinct. He wanted to see Carlisle as its residents saw it, without the protection and symbolism of rank. Darius wore dark jeans, a navy pullover, and white sneakers. He carried his wallet, telephone, and the sealed envelope from the mayor's office containing his official appointment letter. He intended to deliver the document to the precinct's administrative staff. The officers assigned to Precinct 9 had not yet been formally introduced to him. That introduction was planned for a department-wide assembly. None of those facts mattered when his silver Ford Explorer bearing out-of-town license plates sat outside a corner store on Delmar Street near the precinct. 2 officers conducting routine patrol decided that the vehicle appeared suspicious enough to investigate. Officer Travis Mercer had served with the Carlisle Police Department for a substantial part of his career. He was stocky with a jaw shaped like a concrete block and eyes the color of tarnished coins. 3 formal complaints had been filed against him. 2 involved excessive force. The third involved a racial slur captured by his body camera. He survived all 3 complaints with nothing more permanent than notations inside his personnel file and mandatory sensitivity training that he later mocked loudly inside a local bar. His partner was Officer Nolan Pierce. Nolan had less experience and attached himself to Travis with the loyalty of a remora clinging to a shark. Nolan was not naturally cruel. He was something potentially more dangerous, a person whose convictions were too weak to challenge cruelty when it stood beside him wearing a badge. The third officer was Colton Reeves. Colton was officially off duty but had stopped near the patrol car to talk. His colleagues generously described his behavior as practical jokes. He had handcuffed rookie officers to chairs, placed false disciplinary notices inside lockers, and once released a live possum into the precinct break room. Colton confused cruelty with humor. No one had ever forced him to understand the difference. When the officers saw Darius returning to his Explorer with a bottle of water in one hand and his telephone in the other, Travis slowed the patrol vehicle. "Who is that?" he asked. Nolan looked toward Darius. "I do not know him. The Explorer has out-of-state plates. He could be anyone." His voice already carried the defeated tone of someone agreeing before he had considered whether agreement was right. Travis pulled over. The encounter was later reconstructed from 3 sources: Darius's account, the recording from Nolan's body camera, and a brief video captured by Maya Alvarez. Travis's body camera had supposedly been malfunctioning, a claim that later became the subject of a separate investigation. Maya had been sitting upon the front steps of her grandmother's home across the street. She possessed the presence of mind to begin recording before she completely understood what she was witnessing. Travis exited the cruiser first. He approached Darius with both thumbs hooked inside his duty belt, carrying the swagger of someone who had already decided how the encounter would end. "Is this your vehicle?" Travis asked. Darius turned calmly. "Yes, sir." "Do you live nearby?" "No, I am visiting the area." Darius kept his voice level. He had experienced conversations like this throughout his life. Repeated and painful experience had taught him that calmness could become both armor and strategy. "Who are you visiting?" "I have business at the precinct." That answer should have ended the encounter. It did not. Travis demanded identification. Darius handed him a valid Tennessee driver's license. Travis examined it and gave it to Nolan without explanation. Nolan entered the information into the police system. The record returned clean. Of course it returned clean. Darius had no criminal history, but Colton had joined the encounter by then. He was bored, off-duty, and had already consumed 2 beers. Colton studied Darius standing upon the sidewalk in jeans and sneakers. Then he looked toward Travis and grinned. "What is he doing hanging around the precinct?" Colton asked, as though Darius were not standing a few feet away. "That is what we are determining," Travis replied, continuing the same deliberate erasure. "I am standing directly here," Darius said quietly. "You can speak to me." That was the moment the atmosphere changed. The official account, which the department initially attempted to submit, described what followed as precautionary restraint during an investigative stop. The body camera recording revealed something entirely different. Travis seized Darius by the arm. A short, sharp argument followed. Darius did not resist. He was meticulous about not resisting because he understood what often happened to black men who resisted, even slightly. But he also refused to shrink. That stillness, the refusal to make himself small, appeared to infuriate Travis more than resistance might have. Colton removed several plastic restraints from his off-duty cargo pants. That detail raised an obvious question. Why was an off-duty officer carrying zip ties? The question opened an investigative door that no one inside the precinct wanted opened. The officers escorted Darius toward the metal signpost outside Precinct 9. The sign read, "Carlisle Police Department." They fastened his wrists around it. Then they laughed. Colton photographed Darius with his personal telephone. Nolan appeared uncomfortable, but remained silent. Travis crouched until his face was level with Darius's. He spoke too quietly for Nolan's body camera to capture the words clearly. He did not speak quietly enough to escape Maya's telephone across the street. "Welcome to Carlisle." Darius stared back with an expression Maya later described to every reporter who interviewed her. She called it the face of a man who knew something the officers did not. She was correct. Darius did not immediately identify himself as the new police chief. People later asked him why. They asked during interviews, inside opinion articles, debating his decision from every possible angle, and at the community meeting eventually organized by the mayor, Darius always offered the same answer with the same quiet precision. "Because it should not have mattered. When I had been a plumber from Knoxville, their actions would have been equally wrong. I needed them to understand that. I needed everyone to understand it." He remained secured to the post for an extended period. 3 important things occurred while he stood there. First, a crowd gathered. Carlisle was not a large city. With a population of approximately 67,000, something happening upon one street quickly became known upon the next. People stopped. Some photographed the scene. Several asked the officers what was happening and were ordered to leave. Most complied. Second, Maya posted her recording online. Her caption read, "Carlisle police just tied a black man to their own sign for no reason while laughing about it. This is not acceptable. Someone needs to see this." The recording spread rapidly. When a local television station sent a reporter to Delmar Street, the video had already surpassed 2 million views and continued climbing. Third, and this was the moment upon which the entire story turned, Captain Malcolm Avery received a call from the mayor's office. The mayor's chief of staff, Dana Holloway, had watched Maya's video. She recognized the intersection. More importantly, she recognized the man tied to the pole. "Malcolm," Dana said in the particular tone of someone managing a catastrophe as it unfolded, "please tell me that your officers did not just fasten the new police chief to the sign outside your precinct." Malcolm was a veteran commander approaching retirement. He had survived a long career through competence, adaptability, and an almost supernatural ability to recognize which direction political pressure was moving. At that moment, the pressure felt like a hurricane. He ran outside. Darius was still secured to the signpost when Malcolm came through the precinct doors at a pace just below a full sprint. Travis and Colton remained nearby. Nolan had retreated into the cruiser. He sat with the window closed, wearing the expression of a man who had watched himself make the worst decision of his life and was now waiting for the consequences. Malcolm looked toward Darius. Darius calmly returned his gaze. "Captain Avery," Darius said pleasantly, "I was beginning to wonder when someone would come outside." Malcolm's expression moved through several stages in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, horror, calculation. Then a controlled blankness appeared, the professional mask of someone desperately attempting not to panic in public. "Release him," Malcolm said to no one in particular. His voice sounded smaller than he intended. "Captain, we were only—" Travis began. "Release him." Malcolm did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Nolan cut the plastic restraints. Darius rotated his wrists. The skin was slightly red, but he had not been seriously injured. He reached inside his jacket and removed the sealed envelope. "I intended to deliver this to the administrative office," he explained. "The staff were expecting it." Malcolm accepted the envelope. Darius later observed that the captain's hands were not entirely steady. The official appointment letter rested inside. "Chief Darius Whitfield, effective immediately." Malcolm read the document. He looked at Darius. Then he looked toward Travis, who finally understood what had happened. The officer's face became the color of old paper. "Chief Whitfield," Malcolm said. The word chief fell between them like a stone dropped into perfectly still water. "I am profoundly sorry." Darius nodded once. "I know you are, Captain. We will discuss this at the assembly." He briefly studied Travis, then Colton, and finally Nolan, who remained seated inside the cruiser. There was no visible anger inside Darius's expression. There was something more unsettling. Patience. Darius entered the Silver Explorer and drove away. The video eventually reached 40 million views. Every major American news network aired segments about the incident. The networks interpreted the same footage differently, but all of them discussed it loudly. Carlisle, Tennessee, a city many Americans had never heard of, suddenly became the center of a national argument. Inside a home upon Burwood Lane, Travis sat at the kitchen table across from his wife, Simone. She had watched the recording. She had watched the news coverage. Simone was not speaking. In Travis's experience, her silence was far more frightening than shouting. "I did not know who he was," Travis said again. "That is not the point," Simone replied again. Her voice remained very quiet. "What did you believe he was? What exactly did you think a black man standing upon a public sidewalk with a bottle of water represented?" Travis did not answer. "What did you say when you crouched in front of him?" "I saw your mouth moving in the recording." "Nothing." "You said something." "It did not matter." "Travis." Her voice cracked slightly upon his name and then regained its strength. "I have 2 sons, your sons, who will grow into black men standing upon public sidewalks. I need you to tell me what you said." Silence filled the kitchen. Simone removed her car keys from the counter and left. She did not return. She later filed for divorce. Across town, Colton spoke by telephone with his union representative, Franklin Shaw. Franklin carefully explained that the zip ties would become the first major problem. The photograph upon Colton's personal telephone would become the second. The fact that Colton was off duty would become the third. Franklin ordered him to speak with no one until they met privately. Colton agreed. Then he called his brother, his mother, and a former college roommate. He eventually told 7 different people. Every version of the story changed slightly. 2 of those people repeated the account to others. One contacted a journalist. Inside the precinct parking lot, Nolan sat inside his personal vehicle for a long while without starting the engine. At home, his wife Renee cared for their infant daughter Ava. Nolan had dreamed of becoming a police officer since childhood. He had wanted to do something honorable. Sitting inside that parking lot, he could not explain the distance between the officer he had wanted to become and what he had done, or more precisely, what he had failed to do. The failure to act felt worse than direct participation. Nolan called Renee. "I need to tell you something," he said. She listened without interrupting. After he finished, she remained silent for a moment. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No." "Come home," Renee said. "Come home and we will work through it." Nolan drove home. His decision to immediately tell his wife the truth became the beginning of the only choice he made during the entire affair that he would not later regret. Inside a hotel room on the east side of Carlisle, Darius sat upon the edge of the bed and watched himself upon the television. Maya's recording played repeatedly. He felt something complicated. It was not exactly anger. It was not triumph. It felt closer to grief, the particular grief of someone proven correct about something he had desperately wanted to be wrong about. Darius called his wife Camille, who remained in Knoxville with their children as the family prepared to move to Carlisle. "I saw it," she said immediately. "I know. Are you injured?" "No." Camille's voice carried everything the single word could not. It contained their shared history, every conversation about this particular kind of danger, and every occasion upon which Darius left for work, while she silently refused to say what she feared because speaking it would make the danger more real. "I am all right," Darius said. "I promise." "What will you do?" He stared at the television. "My job." The department-wide assembly filled Precinct 9 with 140 officers. Every one of them attended. The room was not truly silent. It carried the sound of an entire organization holding its breath. Captain Malcolm Avery stood to one side. Mayor Everett Sloan occupied a seat in the front row, an unusual presence that signaled this was not a routine introduction. Dana Holloway stood behind him with an expression like a locked door. Representatives of the police commission sat against the wall. A departmental attorney remained near the back. Darius stood at the podium wearing the full uniform of Carlisle's chief of police. Stars rested upon his collar. The Carlisle Police Department badge shone upon his chest. He had dressed slowly and carefully, standing before the hotel mirror before finally leaving the room. After Malcolm introduced him, Darius allowed the silence to remain. He looked across the assembled officers. He found Travis seated toward one side of the room in ordinary clothing because he had been removed from duty during the investigation. Colton was absent under instructions from his union representative. Nolan attended in uniform. He met Darius's eyes and did not look away. Darius appreciated that, not the officer's behavior during the incident, the willingness to be seen afterward. "Before I stood here," Darius began, his voice even and measured, "3 members of this department restrained me without legal cause and secured me to a post outside this building. No one moved. I want to state something clearly. I am not standing before you as a victim. I have spent my career in law enforcement, and I always understood that an encounter like this was not merely possible. The real question was what I would do when it occurred." He paused. "This is what I intend to do." Darius spoke at length. The Carlisle Gazette later published the speech in full. A major national newspaper reprinted it. 2 United States senators eventually read portions of it publicly for different political purposes. The speech addressed accountability. It addressed institutional failure. It explained the difference between an isolated incident and an organizational culture, and the work required to determine which one existed. It was not primarily a demand for punishment. It described the police department Darius intended to build and the personal and professional costs required from everyone inside the room, including himself, to build it. When he finished, silence returned. Captain Malcolm Avery stood and began applauding. The clapping started slowly. Several officers joined, then more. The response was not unanimous. Travis kept his hands inside his lap. Darius noticed several other officers who also remained still, but the applause was substantial. It was genuine. Darius accepted it without smiling. This was not an occasion for celebration. It was a beginning. The applause was also the last easy event Carlisle's police department experienced for a very long while. The internal affairs investigation began immediately. From the beginning, it differed from every inquiry previously conducted inside the department. External oversight was eventually added through the state attorney general's office. The deeper problem was that the new police chief was also the victim of the misconduct being investigated. Departmental policy contained no established procedure for that situation. Darius voluntarily removed himself from every disciplinary decision. No one needed to request it. He publicly announced the recusal before critics could demand it, closing an obvious avenue of attack. He appointed an independent review board that included Captain Malcolm Avery, Commissioner Celeste Monroe, and Dr. Preston Hale, a Tennessee state criminologist specializing in police accountability. Then Darius stepped back and allowed them to work. What the board discovered was worse than the viral recording. Travis's body camera had not malfunctioned. A forensic examination proved that he manually deactivated it. The shutdown occurred shortly before his encounter with Darius. Manually disabling the device violated departmental regulations and carried possible criminal consequences independent of the original incident. Travis claimed that he had turned it off accidentally. The review board found the explanation unbelievable. Colton's personal telephone contained the photograph of Darius secured to the signpost. It also contained a group message thread involving involving 5 additional officers. The officers had named the group the Yard, displaying the limited imagination of men who believed they were being clever. Messages sent during the encounter included comments about Darius. Several were explicitly racist and required no interpretation. The Yard message thread became the foundation of another investigation. 2 members of the group were long-serving officers. One possessed several commendations. Another had been nominated for an Officer of the Year award. He did not win, but the nomination appeared deeply disturbing when examined beside his messages. Investigators reviewed cases involving every officer inside the group. They examined force incidents, arrests inside predominantly black neighborhoods, and civilian complaints. The review eventually produced a 200-page report known as the Avery Hale Assessment. The report did not claim to uncover a coordinated conspiracy. It documented a pattern. It described a culture in which misconduct was tolerated, complaints were misdirected, and officers accumulated warning signs that should have prompted intervention much earlier. 14 officers resigned before publication. 6 were terminated. 3 faced criminal charges. Travis was charged in connection with the deliberate body camera deactivation. Colton faced 2 allegations involving falsified arrest reports uncovered during the expanded review. A third officer, Russell Givens, had been the most senior member of the yard. His case was the most severe. Investigators documented an extended pattern of racially motivated conduct. Russell was the officer previously nominated for the department's highest annual honor. Travis lost his badge and pension. Before prosecutors formally filed criminal charges, Simone took their sons to her mother's home in Chattanooga and never returned. Travis eventually spent time inside a cell indistinguishable from those into which he had placed other men for far less serious conduct. He later described the confinement to journalist Tessa Rowan as the worst experience of his life. Tessa was a veteran criminal justice reporter with the patience of someone who had interviewed many men unable to comprehend the scale of their own actions. She wrote his statement down and published it without commentary. Readers supplied the commentary themselves. Colton was convicted of 1 charge involving falsified records. The other allegation was dismissed under a plea agreement. He received probation, a financial penalty, and a permanent prohibition against working in Tennessee law enforcement. The photograph of Darius secured to the post became evidence. It later served as the central image inside a civil rights exhibition at the Carlisle Public Library, displayed beside a written explanation of the case and its outcome. Colton passed the library while traveling to his new job at a logistics company in Murfreesboro. Nolan's case was more complicated. He had not initiated the encounter. He had not applied the restraints. He had not taken the photograph. He was not a member of the yard, but he had been present. He also ran Darius's identification. The review board carefully noted that checking the identification was itself a choice. Darius had provided no reasonable basis for suspicion. That decision still formed part of the machinery that produced the incident. Soon afterward, Nolan voluntarily submitted a statement to Internal Affairs. It was more detailed, honest, and damaging to his own position than anything investigators compelled from the other officers. No one ordered him to provide it. No one promised that honesty would protect him. When the review board asked why he had done it, Nolan answered, "Because it was true. I believed the truth mattered more than whether it helped me." The board suspended him without pay, required extensive additional training, and placed him under a prolonged probationary review. It was the lightest punishment imposed upon anyone directly involved. A reporter later asked Darius whether Nolan's treatment was appropriate. Darius considered the question carefully. "I believe accountability should be proportional," he answered. "I also believe honesty should be recognized when it costs a person something. Recognized, not rewarded. There is a difference. A city does not stop living while its institutions are rebuilt." Life continued throughout Carlisle. Children attended school. Restaurants opened their doors. The Carlisle Mudcats played their minor league baseball games, and residents continued filling the stadium. But something had changed. The transformation was subtle, as meaningful transformations often were. It did not happen through one dramatic event. It emerged through thousands of small changes in behavior, language, expectations, and the manner in which residents carried themselves during encounters with police officers. Darius held his first community meeting inside the Carlisle High School gymnasium. Hundreds of people attended. In a city of 67,000 residents, that attendance demonstrated that the event had traveled through neighborhood conversations and personal networks. People had deliberately decided to appear. Darius sat behind a folding table without a podium and answered questions for hours without using notes. Loretta Gaines, a longtime resident of the Delmar Street neighborhood, asked why anyone should believe that meaningful change would actually occur. Darius considered their question. "You should not simply believe it," he answered. "You should watch. When what you observe does not match what I am promising, return to this room and tell me." Loretta slowly nodded. She attended every later community meeting. She eventually joined the civilian oversight committee established by Darius. The committee consisted of 5 residents serving rotating terms. Its members possessed genuine authority to examine complaint records and disciplinary decisions. The committee was one of numerous structural changes Darius introduced. Other reforms included mandatory body camera audits, revised reporting rules for force incidents, and a community liaison program. The program assigned officers to non-enforcement duties throughout all 12 Carlisle neighborhoods. Darius also required every officer, with the mayor's full support, to undergo an implicit bias assessment. The assessment was not designed as punishment or public humiliation. Darius treated it as baseline professional information, no different in principle from examining physical fitness or firearms proficiency. Dr. Preston Hale's research team at Tennessee State conducted the assessments. Results remained confidential between each officer in the department. 43 officers refused to participate and resigned. Darius allowed them to leave without public comment. Captain Malcolm Avery did not resign. He remained until retirement and became one of Darius's most dependable allies. The transformation surprised Malcolm himself. He was not someone who changed easily. A lifetime of established behavior did not disappear immediately. But Malcolm possessed the capacity to feel genuine shame when forced to examine something honestly. He looked directly at what his precinct had tolerated. Catastrophic public exposure gave him a clarity he had previously avoided. He transformed shame into work. For someone in his position, work was the only honest response available. Malcolm eventually retired during a small ceremony inside the precinct break room. Every officer signed a card for him. Darius attended. He shook Malcolm's hand and quietly said something no one else heard. Malcolm nodded once. Whatever Darius said appeared to be exactly what the retiring captain needed. Maya Alvarez had been staying with her grandmother Estelle, who needed assistance while recovering from hip surgery. Maya did not intend to become part of a national story. She saw something wrong and pointed her telephone toward it. For a young person raised inside the digital era, pressing the record button was almost instinctive. She did not anticipate what followed. Journalists requested interviews. A national magazine published a profile about her. Vanderbilt invited her to participate in a panel. Attorneys questioned her during a civil deposition, even though the lawsuit was not hers. She was only a witness. Becoming a public symbol because of a brief recording felt strange and disorienting. Maya handled the attention with unusual grace. Whenever reporters, panel moderators, or podcast hosts asked what she had been thinking when she started recording, she gave the same answer. I thought someone needed to see it. That was all. She did not describe herself as heroic. She did not exploit the recording beyond a reasonable licensing agreement negotiated by a media attorney recommended by her uncle. Maya donated part of the money to the Carlisle Legal Aid Society, which represented low-income residents in police misconduct cases. She used the remainder to help pay for Estelle's medical care. Estelle told the Carlisle Gazette that Maya watched too many crime programs and that such things happened when young people refused to go to bed at a sensible hour. Estelle became the most popular person quoted inside the article. The relationship between Maya and Darius did not become the dramatic friendship that reporters seemed to expect. They met formally at the town hall. Darius deliberately sought her out and personally thanked her. Maya said she hoped conditions would improve. Darius said he intended to improve them. They shook hands. That was all. Maya returned to her pharmacy job. Darius returned to rebuilding a police department. They were two people performing their actual responsibilities inside the real world. That was less satisfying than a movie ending, but more honest. Mayor Everett Sloan presented himself throughout the crisis as a committed progressive. Appointing Darius had been his decision. He had made the choice sincerely and with a certain amount of political courage. Selecting a black police chief in Carlisle was not without political cost. Everett deserved recognition for accepting that risk. But Everett was also a politician. As national attention increased and different groups applied pressure, his language changed slightly depending upon the audience. When speaking to Carlisle's black community, he emphasized institutional reform and unwavering support for Chief Whitfield. When addressing the police union, he discussed the complexity of law enforcement and the importance of due process. Before national reporters, he described Carlisle as a city of courage and progress. When meeting business leaders, he spoke about stability in the local investment environment. None of those statements was individually false. Together, they created the portrait of someone attempting to become everything for everyone. That strategy could function temporarily. It could not form a coherent identity. Darius noticed he did not criticize the mayor publicly. Managing Everett's character was not his responsibility. Running the police department was. During private conversations with Camille and former Knoxville colleague Julian Foster, Darius expressed a realistic opinion of the mayor. He made the correct decision by bringing me here, Darius told Julian. I am uncertain whether he understood that it was morally correct or merely believed it was strategically interesting. But the correct decision was made. I will accept that. Everett later sought re-election. A city council member named Serena Knox challenged him during the primary. Her campaign focused upon the gap between Everett's public positions and his political calculations. Everett won the primary by 6 percentage points, a much narrower margin than he had previously received. He comfortably won the general election. Everett and Darius maintained a functional professional relationship. They were not friends. They did not need to be. Public attention eventually returned to the anniversary of the incident. Darius's telephone filled with messages. National news organizations requested interviews. Mayor Sloan sent a congratulatory message that used the word milestone twice within 3 sentences. Julian left a brief voice message. Still standing, brother? Call me. A criminology student at Tennessee State sent a long, rambling email requesting a short conversation for a thesis examining Carlisle's transformation. Darius's assistant scheduled a longer appointment because the student sounded sincere, and sincerity deserved additional time. Darius did not read the messages carefully. He placed the telephone face down upon the breakfast table, poured another cup of coffee, and watched his daughter, Zora, practicing parallel parking inside the driveway. She still could not complete the maneuver cleanly. She improved with each attempt. Darius found something almost meditative in watching someone repeatedly fail at a task and continue trying. It had become one of the most encouraging sights inside his life. Camille entered carrying a basket of laundry. She placed it upon the counter and looked at him. After many years of marriage, some conversations required no words. "Are you all right?" she asked, because certain conversations still needed them. "I am getting there," he replied. "I will feel better later." Camille nodded. She understood what renewed attention to the incident cost him. It was not the dramatic emotional collapse strangers might have expected. It was quieter, a low, persistent feeling he could not entirely identify. Darius had experienced enough to understand that people did not always receive the privilege of naming what they carried. Sometimes they simply carried it until the burden became lighter. The scheduled press conference was brief. Darius preferred short press appearances by both design and personality. He stood at the podium inside the Precinct 9 briefing room with the posture of someone who no longer required validation from any room. He delivered a progress report with the precision of a person who had completed real work and trusted the figures to speak. Recorded crime had fallen meaningfully throughout every category monitored by the department. Community satisfaction results reached the highest level in the survey's history. Officer retention had increased by 32% compared with the period before the incident. Reported force incidents had declined by 44%. Every remaining incident now faced a mandatory review process that had not previously existed. Reporters recorded the statistics. Some appeared surprised. Darius noticed who expressed surprise and who appeared to have expected the results. He stored that information as he stored everything, not immediately useful, but available when needed. "When I first came to Carlisle," he said near the conclusion, "I stood outside this building with plastic restraints around my wrists." The room shifted slightly as the subject moved from statistics to history. "I want the public record to be clear. What happened to me was not the worst thing that has happened to a black man during an encounter with American police officers. It was not close. The incident became notable because of circumstance. What happened afterward was not inevitable. It occurred because many people deliberately chose to perform their responsibilities seriously." Darius looked briefly toward the podium and then raised his eyes. "I am proud of this department not because it is perfect. It is not, and I will regularly be the first person to say so. I am proud because the department is doing the work. That is all I ever requested." Miles Carter, a relatively new reporter for the Gazette, raised his hand. He still carried the slightly overwhelmed energy of someone unable to believe journalism was his actual profession. "Chief Whitfield, do you forgive the officers involved?" Darius looked at him without hostility. He examined the question like someone who had considered it privately many times and reached a precise conclusion. "That is a theological question," Darius answered. "I am a police chief. I will leave theology to people with more appropriate qualifications." Gentle laughter moved through the room. He allowed it to settle. "What I will say is this." His voice did not become louder. It became denser, like a river narrowing between two banks. "I chose not to allow what happened to me to determine what happens inside this city. That is not forgiveness. That is strategy. Forgiveness is personal. Strategy is professional. Every decision I have made inside this building has been professional. The personal matters are what I carry while standing inside my own home and watching my daughter learn to park a vehicle belonging to our family. What belongs to Carlisle is the work, and the work is being completed." Miles wrote everything down so quickly that portions of his handwriting became unreadable. He later reconstructed the quotations from the audio recording upon his telephone, which he had remembered to activate shortly after the press conference began. His article later appeared beneath the headline, After the poll, Chief Whitfield proves Carlisle is no longer the same city. It became the Gazette's most widely read story since the original incident. The comments section received dozens of responses before moderators closed it. For once, most comments were not arguments. Carlisle residents described the changes they had personally witnessed. They discussed small street-level improvements, the details that rarely appeared upon national television but revealed whether a city was becoming better or worse. Patrice Lawson from the Delmar Street neighborhood wrote, "He came to our block and talked with us. There was no political agenda. He stayed for hours. That might not sound important, but nothing like it had ever happened during all the years I have lived here." Her comment received hundreds of positive reactions, more than any other response and even more than the article itself. Darius later returned to his home on Maple Grove. Zora had finally completed a clean parallel parking attempt. She sent him a photograph with 3 exclamation marks. Darius replied with a 1 thumbs up symbol because he believed in precise communication. His son Devin had baseball practice approaching. His daughter Talia was arguing with Zora about a streaming program Darius had never heard of and had no intention of investigating. Ranger required dinner. The golden retriever communicated this by sitting directly upon Darius's left foot as soon as he entered the house. It was normal life, his normal life. It was the life toward which he had driven in the silver Ford Explorer with the sealed appointment letter inside his jacket. Carlisle had spread before him like a question he had deliberately chosen to answer. Darius fed the dog. He helped Devin complete geometry homework. He sat beside Camille upon the rear porch after the children had gone to bed. The surroundings were quiet enough to remain quiet. Eventually, Darius felt better. He felt like himself again. That was sufficient. It was more than sufficient. It was everything. The metal signpost outside Precinct 9 still remained. The city later repainted it as part of routine maintenance. Officials insisted there was no symbolic purpose. Every journalist mentioning the repainting still treated it as though it carried meaning. Perhaps it did. Most objects can represent more than one thing when someone is willing to stand before them and look carefully. The consequences left behind by the incident were not neat. Real reckonings rarely were. Travis, unemployed and divorced, moved to a small community in eastern Kentucky. Reports indicated that he worked for a property management company. During a later interview, he said he had spent considerable time thinking about what occurred. He did not explain what conclusions he reached. The interviewer did not insist. Sometimes every useful question has already been asked. Colton eventually created a life he never expected and probably would not have selected voluntarily. He stopped speaking publicly about the incident. Some people who knew him claimed that he had changed. Others believed he remained exactly the same. The truth was probably both and neither. Nolan returned to the department after completing his suspension and probationary requirements. He requested reassignment to the community liaison program. He spent an extended period inside the Delmar Street neighborhood, where the original confrontation occurred. The work was unglamorous, necessary, and frequently uncomfortable. He attempted to earn trust that had been damaged long before he arrived. One day, Nolan encountered Maya outside the corner store where Darius had purchased the bottle of water. Maya was collecting a prescription for Estelle. Her grandmother had recovered from the hip operation and had taken up pickleball, an activity Maya considered inexplicable and Estelle found invigorating. Nolan and Maya looked at each other. "Officer Pierce," Maya said. "Ms. Alvarez," Nolan replied. Neither spoke again. There was nothing more to say. There was also far too much to say. The space between those two realities was where the actual work of living together occurred. It did not exist inside grand declarations, press conferences, viral recordings, or their long echoes. It existed within ordinary encounters between people sharing a neighborhood, a history, and the unfinished responsibility of becoming accountable to one another. Maya entered the store. Nolan returned to his patrol vehicle. Above the entrance to Precinct 9, the sign still read, Carlisle Police Department. The paint was fresh. The metal remained solid. It stood indifferent to everything that had occurred before it and everything that might occur next. The story you have heard is not a fantasy. Its individual elements, the arrogance, cruelty disguised as humor, video evidence that changed everything, and reckoning that followed, reflect documented events that have occurred within police departments throughout the United States. The names were changed. The pattern was not. Here's the truth. Accountability begins when people refuse to look away. Maya Alvarez pressed the record button. That decision changed everything. You are watching this video, which means you are someone willing to pay attention. Continue paying attention. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. People like Travis Mercer survive inside silence. Silence is a choice. When this story moved you, angered you, made you think, or accomplished all three, press the like button. Subscribe to the channel because these are stories that are too often told quietly. Leave a comment explaining what genuine accountability means to you. What would you have done beside that signpost? Let us discuss it because meaningful change begins with conversation. Do not merely watch.